Paul never does a countdown. Paul, you should always do a countdown. Do you know why? Because it takes a while for, first of all, if you're streaming to multiple locations, for it to get going. It gives you a chance to know it's starting. It lets your audience come in, know when it's starting. That's why you do a countdown. And there's a countdown included under the brand thing, 30-second by default, you can always use. You should always at least use a 30-second countdown on live stream.
Hey, Paul, live and learn.
What did you think of Chris Williamson? And what role do you think he's playing? I mean, I think there's some sort of, the obvious role of Chris Williamson is sort of men's stuff, but I think it's more complicated than just that too. What did you make of him?
Chris Williamson is playing the role of who, you know, he's a proxy for a lot of young men of who they'd like to be. And so his whole narrative arc. So, of course, male model on Love Island. And now he's sort of made that transition to sorting himself out and building himself up. And now he's gaining wisdom. He is the one where Jordan Peter is the uncle. He is the one that young men are aspiring to be, and he's climbing the ladder. Now he's moved to America, and he has an American girlfriend. And so he is playing the protagonist in the online fantasy of many men his age. And he's smart, and he's a good guy. So I met him. I came up to him at the conference and shook his hand and told him what good work I thought he was doing. But there was a very busy place in the room around there. So then I was in line at the O2. I was standing there with one of my hosts in the UK and Glenn Scrivener, and Chris was three people behind me. So he went up and tapped on the shoulder just to say hi, which was very sweet of him. So I should have him on the channel at some point.
He should have you on his channel, but
I don't know. This gets to what Jacob wanted to talk about me being at the big boys table. What we have going here, this is part of the on-ramp problem, which actually when I talked to Matthias and Andrea this morning, I got some ideas of how to address some of this. But it's funny when some people are talking to some of the organizers at ARC and they tell them about us, the people who are telling them about us know that ARC needs us, but the people at ARC, when they listen to Vervaeke and Peugeot, they're like, what? They're just behind the curve in terms of what we've been talking about for the last 5 years.
I was really surprised. I was really surprised in your discussion with Rafe Kelly, where the two of you kept on saying there needed to be more structure. Because my biggest problem with Gina was there was way too much structure.
That's a fair point. And the question is, who needs the structure and for what? One of the things that could have happened at ARC would have been more mixing. Because you had political people, you had economic people, you had NGO people, you had press people, you had YouTube people, you had artists.
People, yeah.
What's that?
Artists.
And everybody sort of stayed in their own little bubbles. And we were all in bubbles next to each other. And what you needed to do was figure out mixers, ways to break those bubbles so the politicians and the artists, they could hear each other and begin to develop what we have done in this little corner, which are personal relationships with each other that host things like the Denim Dinner.
So that's what structure should do, is force people and bring people together,
right? And
then allow them to pair off. And what I didn't like at Chino was there was not an opportunity, because what happened was supposedly you were assigned to an estuary group at the very beginning at random, and then you were supposed to stay with that group the whole time. And that just doesn't allow people to make new relationships and solidify relationships.
Right. And so then
no one ever accused the Chicago event of having too much structure.
No, it just didn't have enough people.
Well, The thing is, Jacob, this place had structure, but many of us just simply broke the rules. And you could do that at Chino as well. John Van Donk was not going to hunt you down in your hotel room and lash you for failing to show up to your estuary group.
Oh, I definitely broke the structure. You may have noticed. We can talk about Fountain of Comfort now, which
you got us
streaming on my channel.
You got us held hostage, Jacob. Tell us about comfort fountains.
Fountain of Comfort is an attempt to get people in this little corner to work together for mental health. And I think that's what came out of our discussion in this little corner, is that we have a mental health crisis. And that's something a lot of us didn't realize when we were first getting into this discussion, is that at bottom, there's a mental health crisis at the bottom of the problems that so many of us are seeing. That's why
Paul and others been helping people with their mental health this whole time.
Exactly.
How many people do you think, listening to Paul and associated constellation of things, feel like they're in a better mental health place now than when 100%. They started? Like Job could be our archetypal example of that.
1,000%. In fact, when Paul was talking about Ayaan Hirsi Ali going to a therapist who told her you need a religion, right? But now that needs to be brought into, actually, this is we can no longer go to the secular priests that are our therapists, and something new has to be brought forth in mental health, where Paul doesn't have to worry about, if I send you to a marital therapist, they're going to be teaching you how to get a divorce.
But implicitly, Jacob, you just made the medical frame the ultimate frame instead of the religious frame.
I didn't. No, not at all. I don't think it should be the ultimate frame, but it is a frame that needs to be integrated.
And I think it's already kind of integrated. And I worry, I think this is probably what Paul's sort of expressing, that if we say, hey, we need a thing with a name and people and money and stuff, and it is going to be
ASMR here.
Yeah, that chip bag was not, anyway, I assume that you got feedback on the chip bag already. But as soon as you we need to be making some intentional demonstration.
God forbid we should be intentional.
Well, yeah, but as soon as you do something like that, then you're distracting and detracting from what is going on, and maybe what is going on, without needing to call any more attention to mental health than the amount that it naturally comes up in conversation, is detrimental.
What makes you think that?
Because it sort of will have this sort of colonizing official aspect to it that could make people bristle, make people pay attention to other things instead, and not actually serve the purpose that you thought it was doing.
God forbid we should actually name what we're doing and be intentional about it.
I don't think anyone can.
I don't understand I don't understand the
I think we're doing something that mental health is integrated into in the hierarchy, yes. But I still don't think I understand what we're doing. And I worry that trying to describe it too much or saying, a big part of what we're doing is mental health, then all of a sudden that's going to have some...
Hold on, one thing. When I started Fountain of Comfort, it wasn't, this is going to be now the ruler, let us all hail Fountain of Comfort, and that is everything that's going to, it's my little project, which I think came out of, and it has come out of the discussions in this little corner, and to the degree, no, it's not a new church, it's not a new all-encompassing whatever, but I think it is us having projects that are actually trying to get things done in this little corner. Rubber hitting the road is important and good. And I don't understand the reticence to actually do something like the reticence isn't, this isn't a good thing. The reticence is, let's not do anything.
No.
Which
Call me when you do something. Besides the organizational stuff.
See, that's cart before the horse.
No.
Put the cart before the horse.
The organizational stuff before the doing stuff is cart before the horse.
No.
Yes,
This is precisely what you were talking about.
This is exactly what I've been talking about the whole time.
Yes, it has been.
5 years into this, we are now starting to organize an estuary thing, which isn't poorly fall, and that's because you do the stuff first,
Do you remember your discussion with with Tim's priest about, we're not ready to do evangelism. We don't have a building yet. Yeah,
that wasn't my discussion, but anyway.
I thought it was a discussion you were
not one that I participated in. It was the priest explaining to a colleague of mine.
Okay, I think natural effects and the institutions trying to capture or integrate or organize those things, they need to be pretty close, and sometimes one can be ahead of the other and stuff like that. But I think Paul's probably
right. And what did I tell you, Sam, when you first came to me and said we needed an organization? I said it was too early. That was 3 years ago.
Yeah, and I will admit I was on the early side of trying to organize things. I think that's known at this point, and I think that I was wrong-ish at the time to be trying to. I think that would have been the wrong step at the time, and I'm glad that
it was too early. And there's definitely, but this idea that you can only start contributing to an effort after someone else has actually started doing it.
All right. So what's Fountain of Comfort going to do once it's had 3 or 4 board meetings?
Well, it's already had 3 or 4 board meetings.
Okay.
But the question becomes, what resources do we have to work with? That is the real question. That's what I want to see is, okay, I have almost 1,000 people on subscribe to my channel. Does that equal, right now it's $100 a month. That's nothing. What are you going to do with $100 a month?
But this is the fundamental error that many people make with respect to YouTube, because you look at that subscription number and you try and figure out what it means. It's a tremendously difficult thing to figure out what it means, and it means very different things on very different channels.
Correct. And that is precisely why. Who pulled this up? It is Billy. Hey, Billy. Okay.
Hi, man. How you doing?
Good. Do you know Billy, Paul? Billy is a saint. He doesn't like
no.
Billy is an incredibly good person who is involved mostly with my channel, but he is a foster parent, and he spends a lot of his time actually going on Baptist. What do you guys call it when disaster relief missions? So yeah. And hi guys.
I just wanted to jump in for a minute. So I don't have a whole lot of time. And hi, Paul. I've listened to you for many, many years. But look, someone who's and Paul, I think you'll understand when I say this. I deal with a lot of foster kids on a regular basis who have a lot of trouble. All right. And I was in a homeless outreach ministry for a few years. All right. And the understanding of how to deal with people who have trauma is non-existent. Trying to find clinical practices and spiritual practices work for spiritual people, but some of us laymen do not know how to apply some of the spiritual forces and teachings from the Bible, right? And there is a very big lack of understanding of how to deal with these people. And when you have 3 kids dropped off in the middle of the night at your house with nothing, and they come from a horrible background, they got a lot of trauma, we don't have time to sit around and watch 2 years of YouTube videos trying to figure out how to spiritually heal ourselves. We need some practical, applicable stuff right now to at least make things kind of smooth. And the way I've done it is basically turned my house into an institution. It's great for safety, and it starts healing, but it's not a serious healing practice. these kids don't leave fully healed. They still have lots of issues, and trauma counselors are expensive and hard to get into. And so my little pushback against the structure's coming, I've been encouraging Jacob to do this because I'm at my wit's end trying to find the resources I need to help save some of these kids.
And I have no problem with any of that, because, and all around me, there are people starting things to help different groups of people do different groups of things. And I think that's the way it should go. And if Jacob wants to start a foundation to help fund and help some people, I have no problem with that.
All right. I wasn't saying he did. I just it sounded like there was I didn't mean to come off hostile. I apologize. But
No, I didn't take it as hostile at all. And okay. Jacob and I just tend to have it. Jacob has a different idea of, okay, I've got 1,000 subscribers, so if I can get $100 from each of these subscribers, I can help Billy Ray help the homeless kids. And that's a perfectly fine thing, especially if you decide to rename your channel Jacob's Fount of Comfort to help Billy Ray's homeless kids.
Well,
I mean, you can do that.
That's no, Fountain of Comfort is eventually, once it gets going to have its own channel, and it's not me. Like, it's there's a reason why I made it a 501c3 with a board of directors, because and that's what I've been trying to do with all of my attempts at making some structure here, is making it bigger than just about me. If it's just about individual YouTubers, then it's just atomistic individualism all over again.
I understand that, Jacob. My pushback tends to be because I live in a space where there are plenty of lawyers around and a bunch of people who want to do good. And what they wind up doing is starting a lot of organizations that actually in the end never do anything, because they spend all of their times having meetings, and poor Billy Ray doesn't actually get any help with any of the kids at his house. I much rather find someone like Billy Ray and help him directly than establish an organization. Now, if organizations actually do get established and actually do help people like Billy Ray do stuff and improve it, I'm totally down with that. Christian Reformed World, what's it called now? World Renew, used to be Christian Reformed World Relief Committee. They basically are in the business of organizational development, helping people that have good ideas to help then organize themselves so they can get more resources, so on and so forth. And I think that's a terrific thing.
So Luke is precisely wrong, as always. The opposite of atomistic individualism isn't systematic scaling. Yeah, actually it is.
Okay, I won't worry about that. So, what is this live stream about? Because I came in here under one set of assumptions, and it's
a just chatting. It's a just chatting stream.
Okay, so for those of you watching on my channel, I'm going to end the stream. I'm going to stay on, but any of you wanting to continue to watch, come over to the Fadarecci channel, and you can continue to watch here.
Okay, what are we talking about?
All right. I thought Jacob, you wanted to talk more about ARC, and I thought you wanted Sam in on the conversation, and then you then switched over to the organization that you are trying to found.
But that's for, as far as I'm concerned, it's completely integral with the idea of you're sitting at the big boys table now.
So what you mean is that I should be at the big boys table to basically run a well-meaning funnel to get big money to other things? I mean,
no,
I'm not a conduit of funding.
Okay, no, it's goes back to the Kuyper quote.
Okay.
Right? The Kuyper quote, which, as far as I understand it, is that religion needs to be the guiding star that leads the rest of society. So it makes sense for a pastor or a bishop to be at the big boys table in anything like ARC, and it should be the pastors and the bishops and hopefully one day rabbis who are in fact leading where we're going wherever we go. And this, I mean, the discussion we've been mostly having, Paul, is I keep on saying, "Hey, Paul, where do you want us to go?" And you're like, "I don't know."
Because it isn't. Because here's the thing. If I say, Jacob, what I really want you to do is organize estuary meetings in Southern California, and Billy Ray comes around and says, you know what? I really help out a lot of homeless kids. And you're like, gosh, you know what? I'm a lawyer and I can set up 501c3s, and I'd really love to help Billy Ray. Oh, Jeff. Wow. Showing up in a live stream. I can really help someone. I don't want to tell Jacob to spend all of your time putting together cookies and rooms for an estuary meeting when your gifts are better suited creating non-for-profits to help people like Billy Ray do better things. That's why I don't want to direct you and micromanage people, because I think you know better what you should do than I know what you should do.
Well, you certainly shouldn't micromanage. That's 100% true. But there's a reason why I drive 2 hours to the estuary in Gino and 1 hour back, and spend basically, yes, I spend
it's
whole
California
day.
traffic. I get that. It's a great.
No. It's not just California. I'm driving to effing Chino.
Hey, Paul, how does someone start a church? Let's say someone's struggling with options, and
you want to be a church planter, Sam?
Yeah, just like, what would that entail?
A Unitarian church fan.
I know. Here I'm going to give aid and comfort to the enemy.
Just asking questions.
Hey, Sam, just out of curiosity, have you ever talked to Luke? Like, Luke used to do home churches.
Yeah,
And
I've talked to. I'm not sure if I've talked to Luke specifically about this.
Yeah. Or sorry,
Well,
not Luke, Lance. Sorry.
Lance, I have talked to Lance specifically about this. Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. How much of an organization do you have behind you? I mean, basically, if you want to start a home church and see where it goes, you've already got musical skills, so you can do the music.
Let's say that I've already kind of done that part.
So you already have a home church.
Kind of.
Okay. So what are you asking?
Well, how does one start an actual church?
You mean an actual church? You mean like a building and 50
Sure.
people, et cetera, et cetera? You build your home church so that it outgrows your house.
Okay. Yeah, I guess so.
And then people, you have enough of them people who are committed so that maybe you can rent a place, and then you start meeting in a place that you rent, and that's sort of level 2. And you just keep going from there.
Okay,
and then
we
once
have
you get
Baz,
to a certain point, then you organize.
We have Baz and Jeff here, and neither one of them come on. Paul and Sam I can have anytime. Baz, what made you jump on? Jeff, what made you jump on? And Chad, maybe too.
Well, I was curious because Paul was talking about ARC and talking to the normies about all this weird stuff that Pajot and Vervaeke talk about, right? And to me, that's like one of the that's something that I think is important, is trying to glean, if you will, stuff that's useful out of here to take it out to like normies, right? We've been running a Monday nights with a bunch of 20-somethings, and I think I would say in large part, a lot of the stuff that has been discussed around the corner is very important to those conversations, because I'm hitting on nerves that, like, a lot of the what would I say? A lot of the vanilla, church discussion straight up misses out on, right? Because the issues for like a 20-something today, right, are not the issues when I was 20-something, right? They've got a different existential crisis than I did, right?
Yep.
And I don't know. I just think that's an important discussion about how do we take what's useful out here and actually use it, But so anyway, that's I thought that.
Well, and I think that's connected to Jacob's question and his challenge and his frustration for me, because I am a Kuyperian, and so what I believe in is sphere sovereignty. So I am usually reticent about bringing application to people who are in other spheres. I don't try to tell the accountants how to account. And all of this, I try to use the religious function within its domain to inspire Christians in other domains to figure out the implications of the gospel for their domain, for their sphere. And that's part of the reason that when at ARC you had artists basically sitting in there and thinking, I'm not going to listen to this thing about energy policy. What do I know about energy policy? I want to write great fiction. And so then they sort of stole out of the room and found other people that wanted to talk about fiction and began doing that, because society needs to be able to walk and chew gum in a million different ways. And yet at the same time, there is a dynamic where these conversations are transcended, as it were, and they transcend the spheres, and then they sort of come down into the spheres and start impacting what people do, given their giftedness and their calling and vocation, et cetera, et cetera.
So when I started Fountain of Comfort, I went and talked to my rabbi, and he said precisely the same thing. He said, a religious plumber doesn't start a church that does plumbing. He starts a plumbing business that is guided by his belief in God. And that's actually a large part of the guidance. Actually, we also went and talked to the abbess of a Eastern Orthodox monastery, and she said the same thing too. And I 100% agree with that. You can't have the priests or the rabbis or the religious whatever telling the accountants what to do, or telling the plumbers what to do, or telling, that makes no sense. But like Vervaeke has been saying, theology is the queen of the sciences. All of society has to be ordered by the priorities of your theology.
The question is, what is the mechanism by which these things adhere? And that very much gets into the question of sort of the civilizational Christianity. Because the question is, does the king order all of his subjects, or does the transcendental layer inspire via spiritual connection those who operate within their spheres?
Well,
and I would say
Pageau,
Luke's been talking about this the whole time, which is Mosaic Vision.
What's her name brought up
very
Mosaic
much,
Vision? Yeah.
well, before we talk about Mosaic Vision, Pageau mentioned subsidiarity, which I think is the actual principle which makes that work, which is each thing should be done at the lowest level possible.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Have its
Luke,
own authority. That's Kuyper's idea. And that's why in the Christian Reformed Church, preachers don't run the Christian schools.
See, I think the Catholic idea of subsidiarity works a lot better.
Where the priests run the schools. Yeah, I would take the Christian Reformed school network over the Catholic school network any day, because they've sort of maintained themselves, whereas the Catholics are kind of a mess. Ooh, my dog's restless.
Dan
would be
Wagonmaker
very
might
surprised.
have interesting thoughts on that. Anyway, Jeff, you're here. Why are you here? What do you have to say? As long as it's not about Fountains of Comfort.
Well, this might turn out to be a comforting fountain, this next statement. But each time that I see Luke, he's wearing more and more. He's wearing his dad costume. He looks like his dad, whom I've met in person.
From like this? Yeah, from like the
Yes.
90s.
You've met Daddy Thompson?
I have indeed.
I've got to run to deal with this dog, but I will be listening on my phone. Great to see you, Baz. Great to see.
Paul, real quick.
Yeah.
You gotta watch, if you haven't, this conversation that Jacob just had with these kids is by far probably the most important conversation recorded in the corner.
Jacob had with what kids?
Absolutely fascinating.
With Justin and his kids explaining war to children.
Oh,
It was
okay.
amazing. It was amazing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I'll check it out. All right, y'all.
I just
Also, Baz,
hopped on. Oh, sorry.
it's weird that you have a face, Baz.
Yes.
I have a face made for typing. So.
No, I had my YouTube playing. I think I was listening to one of Paul's recent videos, and then the algorithm just sent me to this live stream, and I didn't realize it was until I looked up and I saw Jacob and Sam and Paul talking. So I just decided to hop on to say hi, and that was it.
And we finally all know what
always good to
Baz
see you.
looks like. Okay, so Luke, tell us about this Mosaic vision. Does it have to do with Moses?
Is that what I was summoned about, Sam?
I guess so.
That is what you were summoned about specifically. Someone, what's her name? What was that girl who
Dolly?
Yes. She was like, well, it's just what Luke's been saying about this Mosaic vision stuff. I wish he were here to say it.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like the general idea of Mosaic vision is just that there is it's about unity and multiplicity. That's what a mosaic is. It's a bunch of smaller things that manifest into a bigger thing, and they're all interconnected and necessary. And so, but I think it's basically about unities of multiplicities and faith. Like when Peugeot was talking about faith, anytime you see anything, it's an act of faith because you're seeing a unity. To see a thing, anything that's bodied is a unity of a bunch of other of multiplicities. That's what anything is. Like a cup. When Peugeot talks about a cup or a chair, there's many parts of it, and the mosaic is the unity of whatever it is.
So Billy
but
has
it's not
been
just the multiplicity though.
So
It's
Billy,
like it's all the way up and down the top to the bottom. It's
Yes.
the cosmological burrito.
Yes.
just quickly, Billy has for a while now been going through the courts trying to adopt his son, and his wife just called him and told him that their adoption has been finalized. So Mazel tov,
Bravo.
Billy.
That
Yeah,
is
yeah.
Great. That is awesome.
Yeah. It's good.
So do you guys need that explained a little better now with this mosaic vision? Because I like, to me, it's like it's what you and I talked about a long time ago, Jacob, when we first had our first conversation. You said, oh yeah, you mean like standing on the shoulders of giants. It's like that concept.
I mean, it's a neologism. It's not like Luke. I can't Google Mosaic vision and find a discussion of this concept that various people have spoken about. When you Google the Catholic's doctrine of subsidiarity, this is something that's been through the courts. It's been thousands of years, has been discussed. Same thing with Kuyper's vision. You know, when Paul says he would take a CRC school over Catholic schools, I'm not so sure about that. But these are organizing principles, concepts that are that have transferred from person to person, right? So Luke coming up with a new way of describing this vision. I mean, when are you going to write the paper which allows me to really consider this idea? Oh, right, you're not.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't, because I don't think that's the way knowledge works.
Yeah, you're wrong.
Oh, yeah, I know. This is
I mean,
my
you-
wife said that I could be on this live stream if I told everyone it was my birthday, and so she just
Happy
put.
birthday.
Happy
Let's just put this hat on.
birthday.
So
Yeah, I
she
mean,
put it-
you asserting this Mosaic vision is great is as authoritative as me saying no, you're wrong. Like, okay,
Well, but part of that is I only believe in non-coercive authority, which is rooted in love. And so like that's what I talk about with personalist knowing. So like if you respect and admire me and think I have something worthy to say, then you'll lead it credence. And if not, you won't, and whatever. Peace be to
Look,
you.
I give it enough credence to listen to you, but when
So wait,
you
let me
stop
ask you,
talking,
Jacob,
then
what do you
I
think is
decide
useful?
whether or not I think it makes sense.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Great.
So, but
Yeah.
I'm curious, Jacob, what you think it would like what do you think that the utility of it is? Because like for me, to me, it's an idea of like being able to recognize how things are connected. Because I think it's really easy to overlook how, like, especially in the hustle bustle of life, you just kind of forget, like, it's back to the idea of stop thinking for yourself, right?
Yeah.
You're not an individual. That's Mosaic Vision. That's everything is working in some sense together, right? Like so, like I like the coffee mug Mosaic Vision example. To me, it's one of the more interesting ones because it goes all the way down to the clay, right? But then it has to go to the guy that dug up the clay, and then maybe the person that mined the shovel, the iron that makes the shovel that digs the clay, and then it goes all the way up into like the person that paints the enamel, and then the person that makes the fire that it all gets fired in, and then maybe where the tree was cut down, the person that, so like that's Mosaic Vision, and like it's almost combinatorially explosive but it's so you can't really, it's not a prescriptive tool. It's much more like a tool of, if I'm having combinatorial explosiveness in my relationships with others, I can maybe use this tool as a way to see how I'm not that separated from others, right? Not like in a hippie way or something, but it's like it's a way of remembering that God is the thing that binds us. I don't know if that makes sense.
This idea has Yosef, we can't hear you if you're talking. I can't hear you at least. There is a StreamYard bug on Chrome on Android right now. They warned me about. I mean, the great thing about a neologism is it allows you to start with a blank slate, right? And that's why people are constantly trying neologisms, and that's beautiful until you start. Okay, well, how is this different from this other concept that's much older, right? So we could talk about Pageau's fractal vision. We could be talking about Milton Friedman's pencil, Story of the Pencil, which is very, very famous, right? And when you spend a lot of time, you spend actual years seriously trying to understand organizational principles and how to organize human beings, you actually start looking at various ways of doing this, right? And there is a body of literature, a very large body of literature by very smart people about how to organize human beings. And later, and so it's not like I am being dismissive because I don't like Luke. I like Luke. Luke's a nice guy. I met him, and I went to a brewery with him and had a beer with him, right? But when it comes to ideas of how to organize humanity, right? I studied political science undergrad. I Masters of Public Administration, Juris Doctor. I've been studying this stuff for my whole life. This is what I have studied. And so coming to me with a neologism, which may in fact have some new aspect to it, I'm willing to listen to you. But if I can't say, okay, here's Milton Friedman's Story of the Pencil, and here's the Catholic doctrine of subsidiarity, and here's the Kuyperian vision of sphere sovereignty, all three of which have really thousands of years behind them of development, and all three of which could be equally described by Luke's Mosaic vision, then what am I actually doing engaging in a discussion of this neologism of Mosaic vision, which is not developed enough to be different? And sometimes that's the value of a neologism, is to get us to be like, hey, okay, this essential idea that we have, maybe it takes a little bit from all three of those, right? But again, you have to be willing to go ahead and look at these other concepts and be like, hey, I'm going to listen to Milton Friedman's Story of the Pencil. I think you would find it very inspiring, actually, if you haven't heard it already.
Well, and I think I had a friend that used to, whenever things would start getting contentious in a meeting, he would always ask, he would stop everything and he would say, okay, now hang on. What problem are we trying to solve here? Right. So, so if you're, the question is like, why would we come up with a new neologism, whatever.
Neologism.
So what is lacking in the ones that are already there? Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fair point. Right.
And have you seriously considered those concepts that actually exist? Because frankly, I think the Catholic doctrine of subsidiarity, obviously I'm not a Catholic, I'm not saying it because of some devotion to Catholic social doctrine. Subsidiarity actually seems to work really well. And I was very glad when Pajot mentioned it at Chino, right? And I'm sure he would say that it's also Eastern Orthodox, although I'm not. In fact, Eastern Orthodox would probably say that the Catholics are uniates and they don't believe enough in subsidiarity, right? But if we actually care about this stuff, then we should make an attempt to actually try to plumb the depths of ideas and concepts, and to a very real degree, like Luke's whole thing is, no, stop talking about it, stop thinking about it, just be. And it's like, no, no. I love the fact that Grail Country is successful, and it's more successful than the channel, and I think it ever will be. But when it comes down to it, hello, Lance.
I just wanted to say hi to Baz in person and live.
Good to see you, man.
You brought me. I've been new job. I've just been caught in a tornado of work and keeping my head down. But you have brought me out of hibernation. Good to see you.
I've heard you're now leading a new network of Christian schools. Is that right?
Not least CFO and COO. So
CFO and COO sounds pretty leadership.
Pretty leady.
Yeah, yeah. Is it Protestant or Orthodox?
Yeah.
It's Protestant.
So it's Protestant. Yep.
Okay, and they're letting a heretic like you be a CFO and a COO?
I told him I was
trolling
in
with the
recovery.
Protestant.
I told him I was in recovery during the interview process and that I was an Orthodox Christian and all was okay.
Wow, it sounds. I would love to hear more about what you've been up to.
Absolutely. So I got to catch. I was trying to find your live stream. I got a little of it before the after show, and it's not appearing on people's channels. It looked like a spectacular conversation you guys were having earlier.
Oh, I only streamed some of it. It was originally on PBK's channel, so yeah, you wouldn't get the whole. PBK did a live stream, and then when I went on, I streamed it to my audience.
Yeah, I was on his channel. I'll go back, and maybe it was just kind of things. So
It's in the live stream channel. There's a new tab on YouTube, live stream. You have
It's not just live; it's live stream.
No, it's live. It's live. Yeah.
Yeah. I must be going wrong. So
But yeah, Jacob, one of the things that Luke mentioned though was what do you call it with his personalism, right? The idea that like nothing, that everything should be voluntary, right? And it's,
I'm all for everything being voluntary.
well, yeah, because we're dealing with adults, right? But I will say that like his, I do wonder how he survives at home, right? But that's maybe a conversation for me to have with him. But
Yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it, for somebody who's as anti-hierarchical as Luke is, I mean, he's a member of the Eastern Orthodox Church. He, he lives in a city that in a pretty blue state, and so there are a lot of performative contradictions in the types of things that Luke talks about. So while I love Luke and I love Nate and I love Sherry, all three of them, when it comes down to, I listen to what they have to say, partially because they are so opposed to the whole left brain thing, right? Yeah. So I think, especially when it comes to Sherry, I make sure to listen to Sherry, right? At the same time, when it comes down to it, I off 99% of the time, I reject what they say as incoherent.
Well, but also I think it's to hear somebody else's take on things, right? And that can be helpful for us to form or reform or improve, the way that we think about things, even if we don't accept everything that they say, right? Mm-hmm. And that's really the whole thing about the corner, right? That's what we do here, right? So, which is it's something you don't. Yeah, it's something we need to see modeled more, right? It's something that the world needs more of, to be honest. But
So my biggest thing is we need to be willing to listen to each other, which is something a lot of people are not willing to do. Yeah. And the second step, we need to be willing to actually dismiss ideas, which a lot of people also are not willing to do. I mean, have you been watching all the Twitter drama and TikTok drama about? Two things have been boiling up recently.
Well, the Bin Laden letter, is that?
The Bin Laden letter was the one I was thinking of, and the other one was the Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro one. And both of them actually, I think, very much relate to what's going on. The Bin Laden letter, right? It's like all these people are discovering the Bin Laden letter, and there's a bunch of people. The Guardian took the letter down from their website, right?
Been up there for what?
20 years? 20 years? Yeah. Yeah. And they took it down because people were listening to it. And TikTok apparently has been censoring discussions, right? Yeah. And for me, I mean, this has been an example I've been making for many years. Back when I was in college in the 90s, as a Jew on campus, one of the greatest victories we could have was to get somebody to read Mein Kampf. We wanted people to read Mein Kampf. We wanted people to actually see what Mein Kampf was and care about Hitler's ideas and what he had to say and how he had explained things. And so, in a very real sense, as a Jew, it was considered an important thing to know the Nazi argument and be able to refute it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, like seeing, when I saw a copy of the poisonous mushroom at the Holocaust Museum in DC,
Okay.
that's, yeah. I mean, that's, if you know the book, right,
I do not.
I don't know what it's
yeah.
called in German, but yeah.
Yeah.
But
So yeah, I mean, to see what Nazi propaganda is, but really, I mean, Mein Kampf. I mean, it is in some ways a convincing book if you just read it straight through. But knowing how to refute it, right, is important.
Yeah.
And what later happened, and now it's become kind of, what? Reading Mein Kampf? No, you might become a Nazi. And a similar thing is happening with the Bin Laden stuff, right? It's like, I want our young people to read what Bin Laden said, because I want them to be able to actually be able to say, oh, well, this is why he's wrong, right? And we've lost both steps of that. A lot of people just they want to censor the information because they don't actually believe that it is possible to say, hey, Luke, tell me your ideas, sit there, listen to the idea, and then say, okay, you're wrong.
Well, and I think to some extent, I was talking with somebody about it this morning. I think part of it is that we seem to be incapable of processing through, what's a good way to put it, right? Half-truth lies, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so when Bin Laden says, you know, that, you know, you put your bases on our land and this is a great offense, and you know all those other sorts of, I mean, you guys, you know, we've been messing around with regime change in all sorts of countries and all the rest, and it pisses them off, and you know, I get it, right? You know, that's, you know, well, I mean, like, or I can put it this way: I can understand why, you know, somebody could. You know,
I can hear the argument if you don't know that Bin Laden himself was one of our projects and took our money, and so he didn't mind that when his mujahideen were, he's a liar.
Right. Well, yeah, but he's taking something that's, you know, a convincing argument, and okay, so that means killing civilians is okay, right? I mean, that's the next step, right? And that's the bullshit. Excuse my language. That's lumped in. That's on the fishhook of, you know, that argument that does have a little bit more substance to it.
Yeah.
And we seem to be incapable of processing through that, right? Or a lot of people do, right? I would say that's the first part, right? The second part is like, I don't know if you've heard any of the people talking about like the cluster B society. You know what I mean?
Rufo, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, before Rufo, we were talking with Karen on it, you know, in Bridges' meeting about how social media seems to be giving everybody borderline personality disorder, right? That was like 2 years ago. It was a long time ago. But part of borderline personality disorder is this thing that's called splitting, or I think you could also call it totalization, right? Or black-white thinking, you know. But this idea that, okay, if I've got to sit down and I've got to read Mein Kampf, and I've got to decide if Hitler's the good guy or the bad guy, right? And if he's the bad guy, then I can, well, if he's the bad guy, but he's saying certain things that are kind of true, right? Well, what do I do with that, right? Because he's not actually lying about these things over here, right? And so we have this problem where we can't say, yeah, this guy might have said some things that weren't complete bull, right? But he was also a liar and a maniac and you know, and a horrible, terrible person, right? You know, worthy of condemnation, right? I guess you could call it that, right? You know, but you know, it's, I don't know. I'll just put it this way, right? It's stuff that, I mean, I can't say I really have been able to think and walk coherently through these things, you know, my entire life, right? Whoa. So how do we get to that point, right?
Well, okay, so now I'm gonna go back to Jacob's greatest hits. I blame Protestantism.
Of
Um,
course you do. Love you, by the way.
because I think we've come to this idea of, okay, I have to come to the final understanding by myself. Think for yourself, right? And yeah, Martin Luther did 9/11. Right? Think for yourself. The when it comes down to it, right? We shouldn't think for ourselves. We should recognize there are people who are smarter than us, people who know some things more than others, right? And that specialization, I mean, it actually goes back to Milton Friedman's story of the pencil, right? There is no human being who can make a pencil. There is no way that one human being can ever make a pencil, right? Have you seen the $600 sandwich YouTube video?
Yeah. Oh, that one's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
he goes and he supposedly makes a
Everything
sandwich from scratch. Well, he doesn't actually, because you end up seeing how much of it he can do from scratch, and he ends up with a $600 chicken sandwich that's not the greatest sandwich in the world, right? It's like, it's okay, right? But this individualist idea of, oh, I'm going to read Mein Kampf myself, right? And decide by myself, right? Mm-hmm. With the, right? Charlie, if you want to jump on, feel free to jump on. Charlie's been mad at me for the past few days. So there's nothing wrong with actually being like, hey, let me listen to what this person has to say and that person has to say. And maybe it's not necessary for me to know whether Hitler was a good guy or a bad guy. I'll listen to a historian, right, that I trust. And I think that's ultimately what we have to do, is have communities of trust, right? When it comes down to whether, something cabinets, right? I'm going to ask Sartori. He knows. And hopefully there are things, when it comes to Hebrew, I think a lot of people in this little corner will not necessarily go try to look up the Hebrew themselves, but will ask me or Yosef or Chazi. And that's fine and that's good. And that's a community of trust. And that's how we have to move forward. And we don't, this trust, sola scriptura is a edict of mistrust. It really is. It's
okay.
Hey, Billy, right. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Billy. Yeah, that's great to hear, man.
Thank you.
So tell you what, if we could, and granted, I know you love to get into theological debates, but yes. What I might say is part of the completionist ethos, right? Like I've got to answer all the questions, right? And I've got to get to the final exact answer. I think part of that's Enlightenment. That's part of modernism. You want to call it Protestantism, whatever. It all came around, the same time, right? So, the part of it, as you mentioned, like doing these things in a vacuum, right? We were talking with Mark and Manuel a while back, and kind of, I think one of the things that was said in that discussion was that, kind of maybe the big enemies right now are nihilism and solipsism. Like the big things that like we need to be, battling, if you will. Right. And so certainly, having people around that you can trust, right? The availability of them, is certainly a challenge, right? And then, the ability to make use of that, right? And again, that reciprocity type thing, right? At some level, I can only trust somebody after they've proven or shown themselves to be trustworthy, right? Depending on what it is, right? That's certainly something that needs to be worked through too. But I think part of it too is that what we're, and I don't know how much of this is Mark's project, but part of what we're aiming for is wisdom. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And wisdom, and I try to follow along with the Perke of Avot, or whatever those things are called. I can't pronounce them right. But just to try and see what I can glean out of those. But there is a real sense in which, if there was a simple definition for wisdom, right? We would have had it in Proverbs or somewhere in the wisdom literature. And there's not, and there's something important about that, right? That it is kind of, in some sense, ineffable,
Right, and that's actually one of the things I keep on saying. Actually, again, Jacob's greatest hits. When Pajot says Christianity is the greatest story, I say there's no one greatest story. If the Bible could be boiled down to one sentence, it would have, right? If God couldn't boil the Bible down to one sentence, what makes you think you can? Right.
Well, and kind of, and what I, and again, this is more of a Christian thing, but one of my refrains, right? And okay, we'll say this is Baz's greatest hits. If the real point of the Bible was to get a systematic theology, right, out of
God would have written this.
God would have given us a systematic theology, right? And again, there's something important in that, right? So.
Yeah. So did you want to jump in, Billy?
I wanted to apologize for jumping all over Paul, man.
No, I'm very glad. You did not jump all over Paul.
Paul's great, man.
And
he's really easygoing.
And he's used to me jumping all over him constantly. Anyway.
But the thing is, I've been wanting to talk to Paul for 5-6 years now. And the one time I get to talk to him, I'm just yelling at him. So.
No, you weren't yelling at him. Look, I've been trying very hard to get Paul to recognize that he's sitting at the big boys table, and he doesn't like that. It's uncomfortable. And the discussion we were having on the live stream before, and I was very glad Kale agreed with me, was I said the most important thing that came out of Paul, the ARC conference for me was Paul realizing he was sitting at the big boys table, right? And I think that's very uncomfortable for him, and I understand why it's uncomfortable for him. The fact is part of even me starting Fountain of Comfort myself. There was a reason why before that I was trying to get Mo to start the Joyful Mother of Children Foundation, because it was I don't want to be the spotlight any more than, well, probably do more than some people, but like less than most people. But part of the whole cluster B thing, right? The personality disorder thing. It's so funny because I was talking to Max, who's the social worker from Max of Meaning, about personality disorders last night. And like, this is one of the things we really have to talk about from a mental health standpoint, mental health professional standpoint, because yes, cluster B is an actual diagnosis. And if we're going to try to realize how these things are affecting our life, then we need people who are able at least graduate level of understanding, talk about mental health, right? To talk about that, right? And so Paul, I think it's funny, but it does. I wasn't thinking that the Kuyperian vision was so different from the Catholic subsidiarian vision, but I think sphere sovereignty. I'm actually going to have to do some research and find out if he's right about the CRC schools working better than Catholic schools, because I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure about that at all. Mostly because I know the Catholic schools have had to take incredible numbers of immigrant children and children that don't speak English, and the CRC schools have taken a lot of Dutch children. And guess what? The Catholic schools have been doing a lot more heavy lifting than what I have seen the CRC schools doing, right? So I have to actually check into that. But that's an empirical question. It is an actual empirical question. You can see which worked better and which didn't. Go ahead, Billy.
There's some public schools that are doing some real heavy lifting on this, man. My wife, the school she teaches at, 70% English second language. Spanish is the first language. They instituted a Spanish immersion program about 9 years ago. They started bringing teachers from South America who were very, with master's degrees, who were very fluent in Spanish and English. And it takes 7 years for a kid to fully learn a second language. And so although in elementary school, the scores still look pretty bad, but all the kids that are in the immersion program, their scores are better than anybody else's, but they're still pretty low. But when they start getting in 8th, 9th, 10th grade, all of a sudden they excel. Like they just shoot past, shoot for the stars. And a lot of these kids are getting scholarships. And we're talking about a very poor end of the county where 95% of the kids are free and reduced lunch, and then you're seeing, 50, 60 kids out of a 300 kid class each year get full ride scholarships. And all of them are from Spanish immigrant parents, so it's, there is some heavy lifting going on all sides on that.
Yeah. And ultimately you have to be willing. I mean, if you come in with this idea that, I know what's right and I don't care what actually works. Like, I'm sorry, I have zero patience for you. I have zero patience for somebody who's not willing to actually look at the evidence and see whether or not it actually works or not.
Right. Well, the unfortunate about education, I'm not in education, but my wife is. I've been around it for a very long time. Is it takes a decade to get good data, right? And it's hard to implement something for 10 years before you actually know if it's working correctly or not. Right? That's something that's hard to do.
Right. And so this is part of the thing with me with epidemiological data, which is when they take large amounts of data from very large, like, okay, we have different school districts. Some school districts run this way, some school districts run in a different way. Let's actually compare very large data sets with these computers that now we have. That, I mean, this type of data analysis was just not possible 30, 40, 50 years ago. And let's actually care about the scientific principles. And part of the problem is that it's become so politicized. A lot of people, they don't want to know the answers. I see that all the time in my schooling stuff.
Well, I mean, when you're drawing most of your conclusions from standardized tests, that's kind of difficult too, because how many people don't do well with standardized tests?
True. Yeah. I mean, you don't have to. There are ways around it, and there are data scientists like Sam who know how to. Unfortunately, I have to say, I think there's a lot of people who are afraid of what the data is going to actually tell us if we look. And because of that, they are looking for excuses not to look. And that's something Charles Murray has talked about a lot, is there is a presumption that the data is going to tell us things we don't want to know, and we don't want to know. Okay, gentlemen, what else are we talking about? Or I am going to go do other things. Baz, you have to introduce yourself to all our listeners. Who are you?
Oh, I know most everybody from the comments, man.
You know most everybody from the comments, but now you have an audience of people who are working.
Let's see. I'm a nobody, right? Deacon, dad, foster parent, foster and adopt parent, like Billy Ray over there. So,
what kind of church do you go to?
Baptist. Yeah.
Baptist, Reformed Baptist?
Man, it's well, I think if you ask most of the pastors, they would probably say like 3-point Calvinist or something like that. That's pretty common these days in Baptist circles, but yeah.
3-point Calvinist. I don't even know what a 3-point Calvinist is.
So that would be somebody who says like universal atonement instead of particular atonement, and I think they would have one other nit to pick with the whole tulip thing. But so
total
kind
depravity?
of reformed-ish.
Do you
No,
believe in
probably
total
not total depravity. Yeah.
Okay, thank God.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, not particularly reformed. Let's see.
Well, you're a deacon. You're supposed to know all this stuff.
Well, that's the thing, and this is also the Protestant thing, right? We, although I think we could stand to, define our fence lines a little bit better, right? We do have the close-handed thing and the open-handed thing, and we, as a church, we take it very seriously that there are going to be certain things that we disagree about, and that people inside the church disagree about how to articulate this thing or the other, right? And that's okay, right? And then there's other things where it's like, okay, well, this is definitional, to how we practice here, and we can't, like poor Sam.
We can't. Yeah, poor Sam has to. We all have to hate 10 minutes of hate Sam.
Yeah. No, well, and I guess the other thing too is, in my experience, also it's a different thing if somebody's teaching and leading, versus if somebody's just in the pews, right? We're not rolling around and interrogating people, right, and giving them tests and quizzes about. Hey, what's the proper articulation of the Trinitarian formula, or else you're out, right? That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I've never been asked to sign a faith statement. Never in the Southern Baptist Church. All right. Never tried to be a deacon or anything like that. And my heretical tail is sitting in the back pew. So You could, as long as you don't assert yourself, you can get away with thinking a lot of weird stuff in a Baptist church.
Okay, so
That's all churches, though, right? I mean, it really
Right.
is. Yeah.
Well, okay, so I went to MacArthur. What's his name? Grace-
John MacArthur?
Yeah, I
Grace
went to John
Church.
MacArthur's church. It was right down. It was a block down from my office. So I went there, and he mentions we have beginners classes. You're free to sign up, and I went to sign up for the beginners classes. I figured, okay, I'll just go sit in the class. And I was standing in line, and I said, I don't think I'm going to join your church, but I was interested in the class. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's fine. So I stand up in line, and then I get to the sign up thing where there's the questions, right? And there's a checkbox. Is Jesus your Lord and Savior?
Yeah.
No. And then there's an interview, right? I'm like, okay. So I go sit down with this young man, and he looks at my thing. He's like, is Jesus your Lord and Savior? I said, no. It's like, and then he starts trying to convince me that Jesus should be my Lord and Savior. I really didn't come here to debate stuff. I was just interested in sitting in the class and listening. And he's like, and they're like, nope, you can't you can't even sit in their beginning classes.
Well, that might have been a marketing mix-up because, this Sunday at our church, one of the things I do as a deacon is I'm one of those guys that sits in with families in our, our do you want to join, type of lunch thing, and we do it as a lunch, and we go through the statement of faith for the church. But this is for anybody that potentially wants to join as a formal member. Right. But for people that are like just trying to figure things out and that sort of thing, it'd be absolutely the wrong context for that. Right? We have Bible studies and other stuff for that. But
Yeah. So it was interesting.
Well, I have a workaround with that in the Southern Baptist. I am, because I'm part of the Southern Baptist Association for North Carolina. I don't get asked any of those questions because I got asked those questions years ago when I believed different things than what I believe now. And as long as I don't never let my membership revoke, I'm good. I can walk in any Baptist church and I'll be treated like I'm a member as long as they're a Southern Baptist. Right. Yeah. So
there you go. So perfect
Loopholes.
Way to do it is
for me.
Is go answer the questions when you do believe, and then just never revise the statement. That works.
Exactly. Exactly. But look, I wanted to say this, and I'm sorry to jump in on you, Beth. When I first became a foster parent, I was listening to Paul Vanderklay like almost every day, dude. Like there was a lot of healing in myself listening to him and Jordan Peterson, for sure. And I think God's hand was just on my shoulder because the first chance I get to even utter an actual word to Paul, my wife calls me and says that our boy's been adopted. And it's like that's crazy. I can't believe they told me through a text, or my wife through a text message, that it was all good to go. But what can you do at the North Carolina foster care system?
Hey, it's the fastest way. I'm glad they sent the message. Yeah.
Yeah, that stuff's crazy. That's I can't believe it. 3 years of fear.
Don't you have like 15 children or something?
Who, me?
Yeah.
We had
you or somebody else.
We had 7 for almost 3 years. Wow. So yeah, that was a busy time. But yeah,
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Most of them had 5.
4. Yeah.
Wow.
But yeah, Billy, the man. What I would say is just the weight that comes off when you walk out of that courtroom. It's going to be beautiful, and I'm so happy for you and your wife, and yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's it's a lot. Yeah.
All that fear just lifted out. It just.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't even imagine. I mean, yeah, it's a difficult thing. You know, we discuss this type of stuff in the abstract in my classes, like as far as I was just taking a policy class and they were talking about like trying to keep families intact versus, you know, finalizing adoptions and like the rights of natural parents and things like that, right? And it's really difficult because you can see how, and the fact is, in the abstract, when they're trying to make the laws, right, that are supposed to govern millions of people, it's not the same as the individual situation. I mean, the individual situation, like what exactly is going on here, and yeah.
Well, and how much grace should mom be afforded? Right? She screwed up 5 times, but man, she's really trying. Like, do we give her a 6? Like those sort of things. That's just it's a mess, man.
Well, the judge gets to, the judge has a fair amount of say once it gets to him, and that's good because I've seen parents that screwed up really bad for a long time and then they straightened up and they've been doing good ever since.
Yep.
And then I've had one kid that for years and years and years and years, he's just bouncing back and forth between my house and his aunt's house because his mom will get out of jail. She'll do good for a little bit. She'll get back on drugs. She'll get taken away. She'll go back to jail. She gets back out. I mean, and he's been in this pipeline for like 6 or 7 years now, and so, when is enough, right? So it's weird. I've also seen kids taken for stupid stuff. And because the people were dumb and didn't know how to work the system, their kids were lost for 6 months when they should have never been gone to begin with. I mean, it's a hard system. Me personally, I think that every social worker should do respite foster care for at least 3 months before they ever start being a caseworker.
That would.
Well, yeah. Part of the problem is the caseworkers get paid like shit and are very poorly trained, and so this is something I end up talking to mental health providers. It's funny. I was just yesterday talking to somebody about it, and she's a nurse practitioner, psychiatric nurse practitioner. So she can prescribe medication and do counseling, right? So she gets paid pretty well. And we were talking about her choices in which insurances she was going to accept, right? And she told me, I accept Blue Shield, and I have a lot of patients who don't accept, who are paying me cash. I'm out of network. Their insurance really isn't covering it, right? Mm-hmm. And that pays well, but that's not why she got into the work. And so she's trying to figure out how to accept insurances that poor people have, so that she will be able to do some work with people who have serious, not first world problems, right? And the fact is, as a mental health, if you're good, you can make good money dealing with people with first world problems who don't really need a lot of help anyway, or you can make almost nothing working with people who really need the help, right? And if you're actually very good, like, you're going to be moved into like other stuff. And so, I mean, there's a reason why people leave that profession. and it's poorly paid. And one thing that I've noticed, so I'm volunteering with Catholic Charities right now at something that used to be a convent, and it's a domestic violence shelter that used to be a convent, and they don't have any nuns anymore. There used to be 200 nuns at that convent. There are 0 nuns there anymore. There are all these people who are working 9 to 5s, and including working 9 to 5s, the 3 24-hour shifts, it's still a 9 to 5 if your shift is from 12 to 8:30, right? In the morning, it's still a 9 to 5, and you still want to go home at 9 a.m., right? And so, whereas when there were nuns living there, they were nuns living there. They didn't go home. And how much are you going to pay to replace a nun? What's the salary you have to pay someone who's not doing it because of their religious conviction to be a competent nun?
Well, and
24/7.
Yeah, well, and how many people, right? Minimum 3 people to cover 24/7, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Minimum.
Yeah.
Hey, Jacob,
Really?
do you mind if I answer Cassandra's question right quick?
Go ahead.
Hey, Cassandra. So for me and my wife, we did homeless outreach for a couple of years, and it was like beating our head against the wall. I was also doing some drug counseling as well during that time, and all the thousands of people that I've come in contact with, there's two that I helped. They actually got out, and they're off the streets, and they're doing great. But one of the things that we realized why we were doing it is almost every single person we talked to that was homeless, that stayed homeless and couldn't keep themselves off the street, were in foster care at some point. And we felt like that we were struggling against the lost cause, and that we did not have the ability to help these people at the stage that they're at. But if we could be a foster parent and just prevent 3 or 4 people from becoming homeless by being good foster parents, that's well worth it. That's what we thought when we got into it. And we've had well over 20 placements later, and I'm going, I don't know if I saved any of them, but I'm trying. So I hope that helps you.
You want to answer, Baz?
So, and I would just say for me, it's almost like we didn't choose, to become a foster family. It was just like, this is what we're supposed to do. And I'd hate to, take up too much time with telling the story, but it was very obvious, in the first case to adopt our first son. We got a phone call from grandma, right? Do you want to adopt, and then the second one, that was a situation that was my son's brother, and he needed a home. So of course we're going to get licensed and go through all that. And in the course of that, it just became very obvious that there was this one teenager and her son that needed a place to stay, and it was supposed to be our house. And I would just put it this way: I'm a big fan of praying in the manner of God, treat me like an idiot and just make it really, really obvious what you want me to do, and I'll do it. Right? That's I think that's because that's that was one of the weird parts with the. Well, okay, I'll go into the story a little bit. Our first son that we adopted, on a Thursday night, we had a friend over, and she was asking if we were going to have any more kids. We had 3 at the time, and And me and my big mouth, I said, well, we're not going to make any more, but if God drops one off on our doorstep, right, we'll take it, right? And it was 3 days later, that Sunday afternoon, we got a phone call. I've got my grandson. Do you want him? I need to know in 45 minutes. Right. And so when I say like that, it really wasn't a choice in the way of like, this is something we decided to embark on or that sort of thing, but it was kind of what would you call it? A crisis moment that was put in front of us. And really the question was one of obedience, because I didn't think there was any question about what I was supposed to do. Just a question of like, will I do it? Right. So that's our story. Right. but that's how we became foster parents. So. Yep.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, Baz, let me ask you, did you find the 40 hours of training to get your license as pointless as it is, or did it actually help you any?
Well, what I would say is for my particular kids, not a whole lot, right? But I think in general, it's kind of been somewhat helpful, right? Like learning about attachment disorders and stuff like that. Like, honestly, I think that's something that, probably needs to be discussed more, right? For all parents, not just foster parents. And there's some more like trivia type stuff, but in general, most of it is really basic. And, we were already on our third kid, by the time we got our first placement. So, so a lot of it was just kind of rehashing basics, but yeah.
I got you, because we can't have kids. So when we took our first foster child, it was the first kid we ever had.
Yeah.
It's like, I wish I had 200 hours of training versus 40. Good God.
Well, but I think part of it too, though, is like, it's the same way when it's your first kid, like, there's no instruction manual, right? For the most part, I think as parents, we're very familiar with the way that our parents didn't do things well, right? And maybe we tend to overcorrect on that, or at least correct on that, right? But then a lot of times we seem to be maybe we take for granted the things that that were good in our childhood sometimes too, right? And we kind of forget about them, right, when it comes to our kids. But yeah, no, it's the first baby's always a
our first placement was a very pissed off 16-year-old little girl who had been through hell, and that was fireworks for sure. But she's doing good, man. She just now become a CNA, and she's it ain't no thanks to anything we did, but she's doing real good, and I'm fortunate she keeps in contact with us. But boy, let me tell you, that was a very hard year and a half.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the thing is like for me, I can't remember when exactly I kind of came to this understanding, but you know how like if you've got a kid, especially if you've got one that the intent is to adopt, right? Mm-hmm. But until it's finalized, like you never know, right? It's not your kid, right? And so Jacob, that's part of what we're celebrating for Billy, right? Like at any point, right? The state could say, okay, well, we're moving him somewhere else, and you have no
for any reason
legal time. Yeah. To claim, right? Go ahead.
Well, you especially get into the situation that I was very scared would get into, because most of my children are minorities. And a lot of times the state much rather put kids with their minority group. And a lot of times I get phone calls at 3 o'clock in the morning. We got nowhere to put this kid. I don't ask their name or their age or anything. I say, bring them. So, so I have had instances where 6 months after a kid's been in my house, the grandma's very upset that a white man's raising her granddaughter and she wants them moved. I mean, we've had the accusation of whitewashing thrown at us, and so yeah, I've had that. We had a kid that we were about to adopt, and she went through a mental health crisis, and in the process of all that, that was like quite literally when she left in the ambulance, when she left in the ambulance, for me, it's basically my kid died, right? Because we're not allowed to talk to her no more. She's gone, and and someone I've been raising for a few years, and the last time I saw her was ambulance, and I didn't even get to bury her. Thank God she's alive, and I don't know if she's doing well. Maybe she can get the treatment that she desperately needs, that we were not able to provide for her. But that was a devastating time, man.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's just one of those things that you have to have the understanding and the resolve as a foster parent that however long this kid's with me, right, I'm going to do my best for them, right? And I will do what I can, right? Or we will do what we can, to the best of our abilities, just with the understanding that, at any time,
they could go.
They might just disappear, right? What I mean?
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yeah, they can go, and
Yep.
sometimes it's sometimes because of how kids interact with one another. Some people just aren't good fits for the family, right? There's just no way. A lot of people find that a heartless statement to make, and but until you've gone through 10 kids, 5 kids, until you've gone through a couple kids, you don't really see that some kids just are not a good fit, right? There's a personality clash, and it's not good for them, you, or the other kids. And so sometimes it's a good thing when kids go. Sometimes it's a bad thing when kids go. And, we've been fortunate to see, a handful of kids go back home to mom and daddy, and, and not come back into the system, and they're doing really good. And that's the, for me, that's the best thing, right? I'd much rather them be at home than with us. But like my son we just adopted, he's been with me since he was 10 weeks old, and he's 3.5 years old now. If we would have lost him, that would have just devastated. It would have crushed us. There would have been no coming back from that one. And so the last 6 months has been, more fear than anything, right? So we might have missed some really good things being fearful we were going to lose him, So I don't mean to be unloading all my baggage on y'all fellers. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, man. Hey, I am so happy for you. This is yeah, it's a beautiful day, man. It really is.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And honestly, this is really important stuff that, oftentimes our society is talking about silly things, and because a lot of this stuff, it's uncomfortable to talk about. It's difficult. It's funny. I was so there was yesterday. Apparently, a video blew up of Douglas Wilson's wife talking about her spanking policy, and there's a lot of debate about that. And I was looking at some of the videos talking about it, right? And some of it, there's a question of parenting policy. My professor this semester, I'm taking family, a course on the family, and he's completely anti-spanking ever, right? And one of the people who's very anti-spanking was criticizing Douglas Wilson and his wife, who have this spare the rod, spoil the child. This is biblical. And I watched one of their videos. Frankly, they're misusing spanking. It seems pretty clear to me from from their videos explaining their spanking philosophy, right? And when you come down to, okay, we're going to take this child away from this parent and put him with somebody else, right? What's the type of training you're going to give that other person? Because a lot of people think of it in total abstention of, well, no child should ever go through X, Y, and Z. And it's like, what's your level of perfection of the, because I mean, honestly, I'm the two of you sound like wonderful foster parents. I don't know that the vast majority of kids in the foster system are lucky enough to have parents, and frankly, I'm sure both of you will say we're not perfect, right? And so it's difficult, and sometimes, Hillary Clinton wrote that book, It Takes a Village to Raise a Child. And, I was one of the people who took offense at that. It's like, no, people's children do not belong to, they're not communal property.
Right.
Sorry about that. I have construction.
Yeah.
But, and I've seen where that goes absolutely wrong. In Israel, a lot of the socialist kibbutzim had communal raising of children. Like, you were not allowed, your child was not allowed to live with you. That they had a dormitory for the kids, right? Yeah.
Talk about attachment disorders.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, look, it's real hard. I mean, it's real easy to make mistakes, especially kids you didn't raise, people you don't know where they come from. It doesn't matter if they're from the same street you are 20 years later. We all come from different backgrounds with different thought processes. And, at least in North Carolina, you cannot use corporal punishment at all. Like, as a foster parent, there's no corporal punishment. Even standing in corners is frowned upon, let's say. So yeah, there's got to be inventive ways to come up with handing out punishment. But just some kids aren't going to react well to you. Some kids are going to go with the whole "you're just in it for the money" thing, which I don't make pennies per hour. I make tens of dollars per hour. Foster care, there's no money in it to be worth the amount of time that you spend doing it. So I mean, it's easy to come off on the wrong foot to the wrong people. And I think as you become more versed as being a person that takes in kids, you learn what kids you can take and what kids you can't. And if you just say yes all the time, the DSS will dump, Child Protective Services will dump the worst kids on you that they can't find homes for.
Yep.
The one idiot who says, "Yeah, I'll take any kid you call me about," just gets the short end of the stick for 3 years, till you learn how to say no. And that's what we did. We learned how to say no and we only take 3 to 4 kids a year total. I don't care if it's respite or not. I don't take more than 3 to 4 kids a year. So, it's real easy to be a bad foster parent, and it's a lot harder to be a good one. And you can be a bad one without being a bad person, right? You could just not be providing the kids what they need to succeed, And so one of the things that with me being a tradesman and an entrepreneur of sorts, and my wife being a school teacher, it's a good mix, right? I teach kids how to work on four-wheelers, dirt bikes, lawnmowers, how to, paint, sand, things like that, how to grow a garden, how to can, how to hunt. My wife teaches them how to manage money, how to read, how to do arithmetic. So every time a child comes in the house, I don't care if they're 4 years old, 5 years old, 16 years old, I'm trying to prep them for, I don't know if I'm going to see you tomorrow, but I'm going to try to give you as much skills as I can today so you can at least not starve, not be homeless, and not be illiterate, when you leave here. Does that work? I don't know. I mean, is it going to work? I don't know. That's another thing. Some of the kids that we helped out 3 years ago, they're not going to be adult for another 10 years. I'm going to have no idea if I ever have an idea if it was effective. How do you know you're effective foster parent? You don't. You can't know because it's going to be 25 years down the road before they're mature enough to even know if what you taught them or what you did worked or not. If you ever see them again, you might not never see them again. Sorry.
Yeah, no, Jacob, you probably know this better than I. What's that verse out of Ecclesiastes? Cast your bread upon the water, right? Because you never know when it might come back to you. Something like that. So, I mean, it's just we sow, right? We sow. You do what you can, and you just trust that God will, will take what we, have to offer into the world and make good out of it. So
the verse that comes to mind is those who sow with tears reap with joy, and that's you sow during the time of planting with tears, and you just have to take it on faith that you will reap with joy.
Well, one thing I'll say to anybody who's thinking about doing this or going to continue to do it, something that a lot of people would set me up for failure with, especially some of the kids that, the kid we just adopted, or, the kid we were just talking about, plus some of the other ones we tried to adopt that didn't work out. They'd be like, just pray about it. Just pray to God and he'll give you what you want. And I warn people against that because you don't know what's in his will. You don't know if it's his will for you to have this child or not. He might have a different plan. And when you start praying, please give me this child, or please do this thing for me, and it's not in the cards for you, something else is, you get bitter and, it might deconstruct, So especially when things are so fluid in, foster care or homeless ministry, homeless outreach, two things that I know the most about when it comes to ministry. It's really mindful to just please ignore my will, Father, and do yours only, right? Ignore what I want. Please don't take me into consideration at all. And just show me that your will is being done. If you could just give me a little spark that I'm going in the right direction, right? Yeah, I just need a little, just a little bit to know that I'm doing what you want me to, and not what I want me to.
Right. Yeah, and there's, I've seen it with people, right? That like we're going to adopt and everything's almost there, and and then it just falls apart. And I've seen that really screw people up. And I think that's the thing is like you're saying, like God's will, like us praying that God's will be done, right, doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to look like what we want it to look like, right? And it could be, exactly to your point, it could be that this kid is just with you for a season or two, right? And then he's got other plans for him, right? And that's okay, right? We just have to trust him, with the time that we have, to be obedient in that time. So,
yeah. Agreed.
There is a lot of construction here, and I kind of have to go. Billy, I don't know if you want to continue this. You can. You have to go too?
Yeah, I gotta go. I've spent way too much time on this. I had to share my joy with the public for some reason. So anyway,
we are very glad for you. God bless. It should be a beginning for many great things. I am going to go ahead and end the stream once Baz has his final say.
I just want to say, Billy, I'm so happy for you, man. I know, like we've even talked a couple of times, over text or whatever, but about this, and man, it's we're just really happy for you and your wife and your family, man. So